let's talk about drugs. What percent of Israeli adults probably have, let's say, are officially criminals?
Well, I would say something like 30%.
Okay, wow, that many. Okay,
30%. Yeah, possibly more, possibly a little bit less, but anyway, it's a huge number.
so I want to address things to a lot of my friends that and a lot of people that are saying, like, I don't think people should be arrested, but I understand the value having drugs not being legal. I'm just talking about, let's say, just marijuana. Let's talk about marijuana. Cocaine and heroin. I would love to go there and talk about that, but I don't want to lose too many people. But they're saying like they're like, yo, I understand. Like, I don't want anyone to be locked up. I know there are a lot of people that smoke. They're great people. They shouldn't be criminals. At the same time, I don't want us to encourage and legalize it just like I can go to the store and get a can of Sprite. I don't want that to be the same thing. I think it's a bad example. I hear what they're saying. I would say years ago that was my position. What do you think is the proper response to people that want to have rules and laws and regulations that's friendly and healthy for raising children and at the same time can allow adults to consume recreational drugs like that they choose just like they do alcohol as assuming it doesn't hurt or step on anyone else's liberties?
Let me start from the end. Basically, the solution in my eyes is that cannabis in Israel will be treated exactly like alcohol, which means that any adult above the age of 18 can consume as much as he or she likes. Now, anyone who's worried about people starting using cannabis because all of a sudden it's legal, then you're probably 20 years too late. Everyone who wants to use cannabis right now uses cannabis. It's cheap, it's extremely accessible, extremely available. It's probably easier today to buy cannabis than to buying pineapples, and it's certainly cheaper. So anyone who's worried
True.
about people all of a sudden smoking left and right cannabis, well, again, you're 20 years too late. The only thing that what happens today, because the market is still illegal, the price, the quality is probably not as high as it could be, which only harms people. It makes cannabis look more attractive to younger people because anything that's illegal is attractive when you're 15 years old. So if you want youth to use less cannabis, you probably do want to make it legal, which is, by the way, exactly what happened in Colorado, which is probably the best example of how legalization should work. They did it so successfully that the black market for cannabis in Colorado simply disappeared overnight. And one of the implications is that the usage of the number of young people, young adults using cannabis actually went down in Colorado, probably because it became less attractive. So anyone who wants better cannabis, less harmful outcomes, less young people using cannabis, less people being fined and imprisoned, then anyone who wants that should support the full legalization of cannabis in Israel. This is in practical terms. In more theoretical terms, if we go back a little bit to a libertarian type of philosophy, and while I understand why some people find smoking cannabis unattractive, I find the state telling people what to do with their bodies a lot less attractive. Actually, I find it completely an abomination.
Right. It's
The,
pretty
the,
reprehensible.
the,
It's important for people to
yeah,
understand. And this, mind if I cut in here, is that like a lot of people don't understand why so many freedom-minded people are obsessed with cannabis, including those that don't consume. But there is something about actually me just chilling at my house and having to, and if I wanted to smoke a little weed, that I am a criminal, that a cop can come and use that against me to make all kinds of other issues and challenges in my life. And I think people don't understand that it's not about drugs. It's not about wanting to get high. It's about the basic. I have the autonomy over my body, and the fact that the government can know what I'm doing and use that against me and break down my door in front of my kids because I decided to smoke weed on my own in private.
so yeah, firstly, the fact that we don't have an actual autonomy over our own bodies is an abomination, as I said. But I mean, on top of that, just look at the politicians in Israel, people that are usually, by and large, despised by the people. And those people like Bibi and Bennett and Gantz and Lapid,
All of them, you mean?
those people, sorry?
All of them, you mean? All?
All of them, those people that many people find reprehensible, including myself, all of these people have the right to tell, supposedly adult-free people what they can smoke and what they can't smoke. And
Barack
I
is the
find it
worst.
so,
Quote
Barack is,
because the media won't. He is
Yeah,
a hypocrite. Is
so
evil,
let
evil.
me, so let me follow up on Barak a little bit, because one may ask, how come cannabis isn't legal already? Because there is I think a fairly widespread public support for legalization of cannabis in Israel. As I said, probably around 1.5 or 2 million people use cannabis anyway. It's extremely prevalent in Israel. It's cheap. So how come it's not legal? And I think the reason it's not legal is because a lot of people, a lot of, let's call them oligarchs, are making a huge amount of money off this market because of medical cannabis. You have a very limited number of companies that have exclusive licenses from the state to produce and sell medical cannabis. And this is basically a money printing machine. And they're printing a lot of money for themselves. And the second you legalize the market, they lose all of their benefits, all of their privileges. And these guys, including Barack, have a lot of political power. They are very strong when it comes to lobbying the state for granting privileges. And they're the ones that are fighting the overall population and are convincing, donating to politicians, bribing politicians, offering them lucrative jobs when they retire from politics in exchange for maintaining those privileges. This is what's really happening. And then maybe you can throw into the mix also pharmaceutical companies that are going to suffer from the legalization of cannabis because, as was proven in other places where cannabis was legalized, the consumption of some medications is actually coming down because cannabis replaces opioids and other harmful products.
Right, it's really God's plan. So Ronnie has an excellent comment that I hear a lot of, right? Is that she doesn't want to smell weed. In short, she doesn't want it to be legal. Just like you can see someone drinking a beer, you walk by, it doesn't affect you. But if I walk by someone smoking weed, especially if I'm with my kids, I'm not interested in that smell, right? So what do you? I think that one is that like what I've learned is even where it's legal, you walk around, you're not smelling weed. Like that's number one, right? And by the same argument, you can say why not ban cigarettes? And there are, I believe, restaurants will ban this unless that's their attraction, is that we let you, bring your own weed. Then they're going to probably overwhelming majority of restaurants are going to be banning marijuana, just like many bakeries aren't selling alcohol, right? What do you think about this argument that my friend Ronnie has?
Look, I mean, currently, the ideal situation, as far as I'm concerned, is that any restaurant or cafe or whatever, if they want to allow people to smoke cigarettes and cannabis, then they should have the right to do that because it's their own property. And obviously, they're going to attract clientele that is interested in smoking cigarettes and cannabis. But then there are many, many people, including myself, that can't stand the smell, certainly of cigarettes, who will prefer to go to restaurants where they won't have to suffer through the stench of cigarettes, and they will have restaurants that cater to their own tastes. I think that's the best solution. If someone doesn't like the stench of cigarettes or cannabis or whatever, then don't go into a restaurant that allows people to smoke cigarettes and
Right.
cannabis. It's,
Mhm.
I think, a very simple solution. To the extent that sometimes in
What
the
about it? What about in
street,
public? What about on the street? What about public? Because you gave a good answer. What about in public? Like I don't want, especially when the kids. Like what's that smell or whatever? Or, you know what I mean? So what are your
yeah,
thoughts?
yeah,
And what about in someone's car in public? Like what if I'm in a parking lot and you're smoking in your car with the engine off? Let's right.
well, I start from the last part. I don't understand how anyone has any right to tell me what I do in my own car when the windows are, are shut. I mean,
Okay,
I don't even,
so walking in
I don't
public.
even, yeah, I don't even understand what's the argument. Walking in public is more complicated, but then you have the same issue today with cigarettes. Cigarettes are a lot stinkier than cannabis. Cannabis
Yeah.
has a strong smell, but as far as I'm concerned, at least, it's not abhorrent. Cigarettes are. So, in some places, again, even public spaces, smoking is sometimes, forbidden. In some places, when someone smokes, you ask him politely to not smoke next to you. And if he's nice, he's going to put down the cigarette. And if he's not nice, you're going to distance yourself from him. The solution to that is not to put people in jail,
Right.
right?
Yeah. No, I
So
agree.
what I'm trying to say is that you have a sort of balance in life. You have trade-offs, right? So you don't, some people don't use deodorant and they smell. You don't have a law
People
puts
have to
people
wear
in jail
deodorant,
because
right?
they don't
Especially
use
on the bus
deodorant.
when they're holding their arm up and holding the, they're standing next to you.
Exactly. That's a good
And
list.
that's another that's another conversation. All right, let's. Anything else you want to say about drugs? Because I have like a bunch of topics. I'd love to hear.
I would only say that I'm surprised people aren't asking about cocaine and heroin. You didn't want to go into that. I will
Well,
say
I find it
only,
interesting, but most people, I find it fascinating because I find it much more intellectual, and people don't think it's relevant. And because I think society looks down on cocaine and heroin a lot more, as they should, and therefore they don't see it, they don't feel it, and they don't see cafes suddenly offering it. And I think they also think that it's not going to be legalized or decriminalized anytime soon. And I would agree with that, probably with that assessment.
okay, so basically I guess I was seeing eye to eye on this. I will just say, because I don't want to confuse anyone about my ideology. In principle, there's no distinction between cannabis and heroin. It's your body. I would only say that in Israel, heroin is not an issue because firstly, it doesn't affect the medical market as much as medical cannabis does. And anyway, the chances
In
of
in in
heroin being
short, you mean they're not a threat to the pharmaceuticals?
yeah, yeah, and I mean,
It's
cannabis
actually an
is
opportunity.
well, okay, that's another issue. What I'm trying to say that anyway, the chances of heroin being legalized in Israel are a mathematical zero, and it's going to be a mathematical zero for many, many years to come. So there's no point even talking about it. But again, from a principle standpoint, there's no distinction between heroin and cannabis. It's either your body or it's not your body.
Right, but
If
that's
it's
how you're
not your
looking at it. People
body,
don't.
then there's no limit to it. If it is
Right,
your body, then it is your right to destroy it.
right, but people. I think what it comes down to is that even if people, let's say, would assume with libertarian and liberal principles and self responsibility, and you're responsible for you and your life and your body, and no one else is, people still do not prioritize the responsibility over like the greater. They have other priorities, I think, and unfortunately, I think that falls far behind other things, which is why. And I think that having these, even though I agree, by the way, I think all drugs should be legal and they would be much safer, much better, and everything, including the destruction drugs like heroin and cocaine, if they were to be legal, and it would be much better products. I think people also aren't going. I think that falls on most people's deaf ears, as it's not a priority and it sounds so far fetched. And anything that they've ever, including me, I have people in my immediate family who've been addicted, and you understand the destruction that doesn't just cause to the person taking the drug, but literally anyone and everyone that crosses that person during addiction.
You would say that the implications of legalizing all drugs in terms of public health are going to, and the public security in terms of crime and stuff like that is going to be hugely positive, hugely positive. But that's maybe a topic for another conversation.